What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review. And today, we're talking about probably the biggest release coming out on May 2nd, and that is the latest offering from Hate, BELLUM REGIIS. No relation to Regis Philbin. But yeah, like I said, this comes out on May 2nd, this time on Metal Blade Records, and this is the band's 13th studio full-length overall. I've actually reviewed their last two albums, the Auric Gates of Velez and Rugia, and I thought both albums were really good, and of course, Polish blackened death metal band, very much akin to bands like Behemoth and Belphegor, but also akin to death metal bands from Poland like Decapitated and Vader. So I figured, well, they finally got a new album. This is our first one in 3.5 years since it was late 2021 when Rugia came out. So here we are with a new album. And how ironic, 1 week before Behemoth's new album comes out, which, don't worry, I'm going to be reviewing that one too. But, so how does BELLUM REGIIS compare to the last two Hate albums I've listened to? Well, we kick things off with the title track, and immediately starts off more atmospheric with, like, dark acoustic guitars, like whispers and female wails, which female wails are peppered in on a few songs on this album, but they're done to kind of add, like, I guess a little bit of a Middle Eastern folk vibe I get from time to time. But after that beginning, straight in the tremolo melodies and blast beats that are very much in the blackened death metal realm. And even the riffs that follow are just downright sinister and evil. But then again, saying all these riffs are sinister and evil would be an understatement. That's basically across the board on this entire album. You get like massive, sinister, evil riffs, whether they be chugs or big tremolo melodies, whether done in a death metal sense or a black metal sense. But one thing that came through on this album, perhaps more than the last two, at least to my recollection, there's more dissonance going on here. Like, after you get through like a brief atonal section, some blazing drums, you always get these dissonant tags on top of grooves, or like dissonance in general. And then suddenly it goes straight in the dive bombs, and then to some classic Hate riffs, which are very much black and death oriented. And then peppered in on a lot of these songs, like I would say about a good 37 to 40% of this album, you get like either clean guitars or acoustic guitars or both together to kind of add a little bit more dynamic and a little more melody. And then the lead work, I will say for the most part, the lead work on this album's all about melody rather than showing off like, hey, how fast I can play. After all, Adam, the first center, who I think does the majority of the leads, who is also the frontman, he's a very talented guitarist and a very underrated vocalist. Like, he's got such a good, evil roar to him. But moving ahead into, I've been trying to pronounce this as best as I can, Iphigenia. I think I got it right the first time. This is where I thought, okay, are they going for a little bit of a Middle Eastern vibe? Because it starts off with these like almost Middle Eastern acoustics, but it's on top of riffs. And I will go ahead and say, I think probably a big influence on this album would be Immolation, because I get so many Immolation nods all throughout this album when it comes to some of the riffs and the dissonant tags and the dissonant melodies. I get lots of nods to Immolation, but also, of course, to bands like Morbid Angel and maybe even a little bit of Incantation, but it's mostly Immolation to my ears. And then you get into these like haunting tremolo harmonies. Of course, this is where we really get groove and chug coming along, and it builds up very well into more dissonant melodies. And then we get into the song The Vanguard. This song, I think, is where most of the black metal will come in, like most of the black metal elements will show up. Well, that and another song that I'll be talking about towards the end, but this one, like, it starts off with this like haunting dissonant melody, but there's like classical music being played. And then it gets into like melodic black metal territory, almost like Dissection a little bit, or even bands like Dissection, like melodic blackened death tremolos and blast beats. And then you do get your lower death metal tremolos, but then it lumbers pretty well with those tremolos on top. And then a ghost of lost delight, we get back to like evil tremolos and more dissonance, more immolation worship, dark lead melody, and of course you still get black metal tremolos throughout. And then we get into an interlude that I actually didn't mind, Rite of Triglav, where it's like tribal beats, female wailings, and chants. It almost sounds like something you would hear on a Nile album. And then Perun Rising, dissonant tremolos, groove. There's also some really cool like triplet gallops, but it's still very, very murky and very dark. And then probably some of the biggest tremolo melodies you get on the album shows up on this song, and even some triplet chugs show up towards the end. And then we get to Alfar Inferi, Goddess of War. This one kind of goes all over the map. Like it starts off again very much in the vein of Immolation with the tremolos and the riff structure, but then you get into more blast beats. There's even some like thrashy tags. It even gets at times, like with some of the riffs that show up here, a little bit towards tech death, like akin to Decapitated a little bit. And then you get into Prophet of Arkan, where, man, you want to talk about murky, crawling tremolo riffs. Holy crap, this song has it all. And then the dissonant melodies and the groove that shows up on this song more or less reminds me of Mastodon. Like, it's a little more tuneful and not as evil sounding. But of course, Morbid Angel riffs come alive on this song, and it really, really made an impact. And then the closer, Ageless Harp of Devilry, this was the other song, kind of like the Vanguard, where there's more black metal moments going on than just straight up blackened death. Like the tremolos and the blasts that start this one off are very much black metal, but you do get like death metal chug and groove. But there's also some pretty cool atmosphere that gets peppered in on this track, and it's a little more melodic overall than most of the songs on this album. Production-wise, I think this is pretty strong, and you even get like really cool moments where you hear like bass slides to kind of add a little bit more to the mood of certain songs, especially on the closer. Really, the only things I have minor gripes about would be that interlude just being its own track. It honestly could have been tagged on to Perun Rising, and I think it would have made that song stronger. And I will say, this album is pretty top-heavy. Like, the first 4 songs are the longest tracks of the album at over 6 minutes, almost 7. And then the second half onward, the songs get under 5 minutes, apart from Perun Rising. So I do think, like, those first 4 songs were the big standouts. Not saying the rest of the songs were bad, I'm just saying, like, the first 4 really got this album going, and it was just, again, it just felt very top-heavy. I feel like if you would have separated those longer songs in between the shorter songs, I think you would have had a more better flow of songs. But those are just very minor nitpicks that I have. Overall, I think this is better than their last 2 albums. I'm going to say this is a possible top 10 album of the year contender already. This is a 4.5 out of 5. Man, riffs all over the map. It's evil, it's melodic, and it's sometimes downright brutal. So if you are a fan of Behemoth, Belphegor, Decapitated, Immolation, especially on this album, check this out. Further proof that Hate are doing Behemoth better than Behemoth. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching, keep your horns high, and your dreams wet.